So I'd like to welcome our guest today, Whitney Tilson. I've known Whitney for probably 28 years, maybe a little longer. And in full disclosure, I've been Whitney's lawyer. He might have cheated on me a little, but from what I can tell, at least 28 years. So, and you don't have to even address whether you use other lawyers, but so we go way back. And so I know him not only professionally, but personally. So Whitney, welcome to our podcast, Unfiltered Finance, with my co-host, John D'Agostino.
Nice being here. Thanks for inviting me.
It's our pleasure. So how's the campaign trail going?
Well, it's a whirlwind, about what I expected. It's 24/7. I'm out there participating. I've got mayoral forums tonight and tomorrow. This is my second podcast today. So a lot of talking to voters, getting out and getting in front of voters, and a lot of media. You know, we're in a big city, and the only way to reach a lot of people is through the media. And, I'm still raising money as well. So that comes with the job.
And for anybody who doesn't know you or doesn't know you well enough, what motivated you to do this? Because this is your first foray into politics.
Yeah, well, I've actually been involved, very active politically as a donor and advocate for things like education reform, charter schools, sort of sensible centrist Democratic politics for more than 20 years. This is my first time running for office, and it was sort of after the election 3 months ago, looking at 90% of U.S. counties shifted toward Trump and being shocked and horrified, but recognizing that part of the reason this happened was because we Democrats have not been doing a good job running the places we control. And New York City, which a city I love, my party, I think, is screwing up this city with a combination of bad ideas executed badly. And, city halls become corrupt, bloated, beholden to special interests. And I looked at the field, and it was, a cast of different flavors of more career politicians who I don't think you can fix the system if you are beholden to the system. So I decided to run to give voters a choice of someone who's got a business and managerial background and who's not from the system. So I can fight for New Yorkers every day.
And what do you see as your biggest barrier to entry or hurdle in getting elected?
I start with very low name recognition. And so trying to get my name out in a primary that is on June 24th, so less than 5 months away. And then just sort of getting my message out to voters. And by the way, it's deliberately, the party machine in New York deliberately schedules the election in an off year in the middle of the summer. It's a closed primary, meaning only registered Democrats can vote. So last election, only 26% of eligible voters voted in the primary. And so effectively, Adams was elected mayor with 5% of the vote in New York. 400,000 votes in a city of 8.8 million elected our last mayor. And so that's not a democracy, and that's something I want to fix so that our mayoral electorates are the same as presidential elections. But
so Whitney, I think I find this stuff fascinating as a pure political neophyte, lifelong New Yorker. I'd love to maybe dive a little bit into the under the hood of kind of this engine you talked about, because it's funny you said that you don't have name recognition. I actually know who you are because I'm in finance. I think you've done a great job of building up in that universe of Wall Street. You built up a great name for yourself over the years. I was going to ask you the question of is having that media presence helpful? But I kind of want to pivot into what you just said and maybe dig a little deeper. How do you, those 400,000 to 500,000 New Yorkers who vote in this election, how do New York mayoral candidates reach them?
Well, if you're Mike Bloomberg, you can drop $73 million. You can buy name recognition, but there is no candidate who is self-funding this year in the primary. all of us are taking city matching money, which means we're all capped at spending $7.9 million, but that's with an 8-to-1 city match. So I actually am looking to raise about $1.5 million, and then the city will match roughly 6.5, and that'll get me to the max. So with that, I'm hiring a team. I've got 20 great people going to 30. And to get my name out there with the media, with press conferences, going to mayoral forums, and literally going out and setting up tables outside subway stops and meeting and greeting voters. But very importantly, putting out policy papers and all. I can say things running as an insurgent outsider that none of the other Democrats running will dare say, because it might alienate some interest group, or they'll get attacked by somebody on the far left, and that's okay with me.
And when you're talking to these voters, when you're at the subway station, when you're at these tables, just kind of curious. I know we're early in the process, or maybe not, but are the issues that you're hearing them talk about the ones that we all think about every day? Crime, transportation, anything you're hearing that surprises you?
Not really. I mean, if you look at the polls and then you look at what I'm hearing, it's number one issue is affordability. People can't pay their rent. Number two issue is not feeling safe. There's the 7 major felonies in New York are up an average of 52% in the last 5 years. And it's up, felony assaults on the subway are up 150% in the last 5 years. So it's, Mayor Adams is out there basically lying to the people of New York, telling them, oh, it's all in your imagination and we're the safest large city in America. And we've, in fact, become materially less safe. And then lastly, anyone with children is not happy with the school system, in which we're spending $40 billion, $43,000 a kid, and half the kids aren't reading at even a basic level. So, those are the big issues. I would say related to both affordability and crime is homelessness, and in particular, the street homeless, which I'm determined to eliminate by actually getting the city council to reverse the law it passed a year and a half ago, enshrining the right to sleep outside, those 5 words. And I said, my view is the exact opposite. There should be no right for anyone to sleep in our public places, our parks, our streets, our subways overnight. And but I'm not talking about arresting 4,000 people who are sleeping out in our streets every night and criminalizing homelessness. These are people who need help. The crime is what's happening now, both to our quality of life and to these people who are suffering. And I think the only way to eliminate street homelessness is to forbid it, but then do a much better job of running our shelter system and helping these people who need help.
Do you see us having the budget to produce a shelter system that could handle that type of capacity?
Well, keep in mind, New York has a right to shelter law. It is the only city in the country. It's not a state law. It's actually not even a law. It's a settlement, dating back to 1979. And so New York actually last night, for example, about 88,000 people were in our shelter system of some sort, drop-in centers, et cetera. About 5%, that's 95% of the homeless in New York. 5%, about 4,000 people were out on the streets last night. So we've actually addressed not well. The shelter system is not well run. It's wildly expensive. Some of the shelters are really quite terrible, which is why many people are choosing to stay out in the streets rather than go into a shelter. But, this is the good news is that it is a manageably sized problem. And we've got it, but the toughest 5% is what we now need to tackle.
Do you want to stay on this issue, John, or are there other, you want to focus on some of the other issues? I
think it's a central tenet. I've heard Whitney speak a few times now. It's a central tenet of his proposal. Certainly the one I think people really are drawn to. So Whitney, maybe just a little bit of color. So I'll give you one observation. So I heard, I forget his name, but I heard one of Mayor Bloomberg's top lieutenants speak recently. I'm not sure how you feel about Bloomberg, but a lot of New Yorkers, think fondly back to those times, and whether it was his doing or not. The comment he made was interesting is he said that as far as he knew, Mayor Bloomberg was the first and last New York City mayor. And the way he described it was there's like dozens and dozens of departments that roll up to the mayor. There's like New York is split into like 50, 60 departments. And he said, Mayor Bloomberg said the 3 that matter. So the only 3 that will report to me, everyone else goes through a lieutenant. the three that report to me every day, so police, transportation, education. And if you solve for those three in New York City, New York is doing great. Everything else can go through someone else. Do you buy into that theory? Is that how you would govern?
Yes. It's actually, I believe, the mayor appoints the top 37 heads of all the major departments and the school's chancellor. So that would be 38. The two most important would be school's chancellor and police commissioner. And then, by the way, the mayor appoints the next 120 plus people beneath them. So it's a strong mayoral system. And the most important thing I'll do is, of course, set the broad policy agenda. But the second most important thing is hire super and great people who are, it's sad to say, most, starting with who are not corrupt, and second, who are competent. And that has not been the norm under Mayor Adams, who is corrupt and incompetent himself and has surrounded himself with people like that. But I approach this with humility. And so I'm going to try and find people who, every single one of whom is smarter than I am in their particular area, and then support them in serving the people of New York better, first and foremost. And second, finding me the fat. We're the richest city in the world. We have a very high tax rate that translates into a $115 billion city budget. That is double that of any city in the world. And when I look in every area, we spend so much. But I look at the output, student learning or crime rate, or, how well our subway system is operating. And I just don't know where all the money goes. And the answer is it's just a very poor, it's, I think, less corruption than just very poor management and the politicians being beholden to every special interest. So there's just sort of giveaways everywhere that is not in the best interest of taxpayers. So I'm going to fix all that.
Do you have any concern by not playing nice with the special interest groups, it's going to handicap your likelihood or probability of being elected?
Yes. In fact, it's why I'm a dark horse and not a favorite. I don't think there is a favorite in the race at this point, and at least until if Governor Cuomo enters, the polls show he's polling higher, but 33% is still not very high than everyone else. So yes, it is definitely a challenge that in a low turnout off-season, sort of rigged election, rigged to reduce the turnout, it's designed that way such that, the teachers union would be the most powerful special interest in the city, I think, can turn out a reliable number of voters, and then they own the mayor. And so how is that mayor then supposed to negotiate hard with them and do what's right for kids? So yes, it's definitely a challenge, and but it is the only thing I believe in, and it's the only path for someone like me.
And have you spoken off record to any other mayoral candidates to compare notes or even support one another in certain ways?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've met most of them now because we've sat on the same stage together at a number of mayoral forums, and I'm going to be on the stage with 5 of them tonight at a mayoral forum on the arts out in Brooklyn, for example. And honestly, I don't want to. I'm not going to be running big attack ads against them because I think most of them are, they're not corrupt. They want to do what's best for their city, but they are creatures of the system. They are career politicians, every one of them. And that means that they owe their current position and their future, their entire career is dependent on, sucking up to certain special interest groups, and certainly not saying anything that could possibly alienate some other special interest group. Like, my proposal that to have a law in the city that forbids anyone from sleeping out on the streets in our public spaces. The advocates for the homeless will attack me, and so that's okay because this is what's best for them, the street homeless, and what's best for all the citizens of New York. But there are certain very vocal, overly powerful, I would argue, sort of special interest groups that seem to dominate the conversation. I'll cite, for example, our biggest problem in this city is people can't afford their rent. That's purely a supply problem. We've made it almost impossible to build in this city. Single biggest piece of that would be the crazy zoning rules. And it's because you got a lot of NIMBY types, and, every city council has veto power over any development in their district. And so we've made, development impossible, and all New Yorkers are suffering from sky high rents. And but politicians aren't willing to do anything about it because of some sort of very, very noisy fringe activists.
So Whitney, on this topic of sort of noise and the politics. So first of all, I want to say thank you for you injected nuance into this corruption versus incompetence conversation. And I think that's really important. I appreciate that. I think the word corruption is being kind of thrown around as a surrogate for incompetence because it's a lot more aggressive. And I really appreciate you injecting the nuance into a conversation because, quite frankly, when you're running for office, it's more expedient from time to time to maybe not inject nuance. So I really appreciate that. I'm thinking about your homeless argument, and I know you have. I mean, your background is very impressive. It just flat out is, and I think it's wonderful that people like you with lots of options are considering things like running for mayor. And one of those things you did was you started a nonprofit, or you co-founded a very successful nonprofit around education. Am I correct?
Well, I'm not. I've done many is the answer. I've founded or co-founded or been one of the key board members of a dozen different nonprofits. Are you referring to Teach for America? Or KIP?
Yes, I'm referring for Teach for, yes.
Yeah.
Teach for America, yes.
Yeah, that was my first job out of
and you actually did that.
Start that.
Yeah, and you actually did that. But I mean, is when I heard you say that, I was skeptical because I've heard of Teach for America, and I was like, but I went back and looked, and the other co-founder acknowledges you. So you, unlike lots of people who say they started things, you didn't just work for it. You were a co-founder of Teach for America, which is extraordinary. And congratulations for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I was employee number 2 joining Wendy Kopp. It was her idea, and I give her the primary credit as the founder, but there was a small group of us that I was part of.
Yeah, she credits you as co-founder.
Yeah, that's
she credits you as co-founder.
Yeah.
And
I'll take the compliment.
No, but that's important because a lot of people say. So my point is, I really appreciate that subtlety and that nuance because I know you don't have to have it. So I think when people sort of are going to attack you and say that's an inhumane policy, does it help to be able? It's always bad taste to brag about oneself, but does it help to be able to cite a very long, predating political aspiration history of charitable giving? Is that a defense against that, or is it useless?
Yeah, and part of the reason I'm running as a Democrat in the Democratic Party and lifelong Democrat, I grew up in Tanzania, Nicaragua, and I've always been fighting against injustice and tackling big problems and helping people who are hurting. So that does give me a platform to talk about something that, at first glance, this is, for example, a law that Florida passed under Ron DeSantis just last year. And the knee-jerk reaction from Democrats would be that, the criminalizing homeless and you're out there trying to hurt people. And in fact, it is working down in Florida. And I've done the research on what's happened in Florida. And the passage of the state law has actually been a catalyst to force cities to, and what I want to happen in New York is to help the sort of the last 5 or 10% of people who are suffering the most and need help.
I'm guessing the Venn diagram of that 5,000 people and the most mentally ill of the homeless population overlap significantly. I don't have any data to support this, but I'm just going to make an educated assumption. Do you think that's about right?
Yeah, keep in mind the 88,000 people who were in our shelters last night are mostly families. It's affordability homeless. And that's why to address the homelessness problem, we just got to build a lot more moderate affordable housing. But the street homeless are generally single men. Most are suffering from mental illness and or addiction of some sort. Most have suffered trauma in their lives. They may not trust the shelter system. Keep in mind, if all 4,100 of them is the latest count, if all 4,100 of them showed up and wanted a bed tonight, we don't have enough beds. However, any one of those individuals tonight could show up and there would be a bed. So in other words, those 4,100 people are voluntarily choosing to spend the night in the middle of the winter, outside. In some cases, because they've had a bad experience in the shelter, they don't like the curfew. They don't like the food. Who knows? But in some cases, it's because they're severely mentally ill and are not making good judgments and are suffering as a result. But in either case, I don't think anyone should be able to make that choice. It is not acceptable in a civilized city for anybody to be spending the night out in our public spaces.
Can we switch to taxes? Having started a business in New York City and been here for almost 29 years, taxes has been just crushing. So you mentioned comparing it to the experience on how much we spend per student and the return on investment.
Right.
I sit here as I'm a New Jersey resident who works in New York City.
Yeah.
In a material way, right? Meaning I'm not here every day of the week, but the times I'm here, the city isn't what it used to be, at least looking back 20, 30 years. For me, not only from the cost of taxes, but the quality of the services as well. You just mentioned the subway system. Any approach you've been taking out from a platform perspective on the percentage of taxes being paid? And
yeah. Well, a few things. One is in the 30 plus years I've been in New York City, I think actually the city has improved dramatically. It's really been the past 5 years in the area, particularly in the area of crime and safety, that we've gone in the wrong direction. And in our school system, really since Mayor Bloomberg left 11 years ago, the whole system has now just become beholden to the unions again. Taxes, we've always been a high tax city. I am certainly not going to be raising taxes. As I mentioned earlier, the people running this city, we are already spending so much in every area. You know, the cost to build a mile of subway is 6 times that of any other city in the world. Our schools are spending, the national average public school spend is a little over $17,000, and we're over $43,000. Well, that's almost triple, right? So there's what I am going to do is not come in like this doge that's going on at the federal level and just have a bunch of 19-year-olds coming in turning off the spigot. That's not the way to improve and fix a big broken system. In New York City and the federal government, there's lots of fat and waste, right? But you need to do it in a smart way to find the fat and not cut essential services, which is what's sadly happening at the federal level in a way that I think there are going to be terrible consequences. So I can't promise you lower taxes. I can promise they're not going to go higher, but I can promise you your tax dollars, the taxes you are paying are going to be spent a lot more effectively to create a better environment for all businesses, to build a lot more affordable housing, to make it much higher, much safer city. We had become one of the safest large cities in America, and we've regressed substantially in the last 5 years. To operate our schools better and so forth.
And by the way, I want to correct one thing I did say. Yeah, parts of the city have gotten better. Times Square, I remember before it was cleaned up to where it is now.
Yeah.
But I compare when I travel internationally, like the subway system, where you can tell to the minute when the subway is coming.
Yes.
The stations are cleaner.
Yes.
They're less crowd. At least when I've been there, it's not like I was there every day, but it's not filled like to a chokehold of 50 people on a platform all trying to crowd in because you've been waiting 15 minutes for the prior subway.
Now, I want to get in on this because Ron and I disagree on this as my dear friend. And Whitney, I was supposed to interview you previous to this, but the other co-host so vehemently disagreed with my disagreements that he cut me out. I think you're a big boy. You're smarter than I am. And I think you and I can disagree civilly. And I can still support you for mayor, by the way, because I think you're brilliant and you should be mayor. But before we get into that, I want to ask one quick question. So on the issue of spending, would you commit to radically improving the transparency? I'm not a fan of what's going on there. The one thing I do like is him saying we're going to put everything on blockchain or we're going to make everything transparent. And that's an extreme position, but would you commit to being more transparent with spending?
Yes, for sure. It drives me crazy. Here I am running for mayor, and I see this big $115 billion budget, and I know the big breakdowns. $40 billion for schools, 11 billion for cops, 4.7 billion on the migrants, 4 billion on the homeless, and $2 billion in our fire department. Right, those are the big buckets. But in every area on any metric, we're spending far more than every other large city in America. And the output is mediocre at best, failing at worst. So we need a lot more transparency. And for sure.
I mean, the Times just ran an article, I think it was last week, about 2 police officers that moved down to Florida for less compensation, and how they've been spending a bloated amount of money to pay overtime.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're at a 34-year low in terms of the number of police officers in the city. That has contributed to rising crime for sure. They're just understaffed, but it's also been demoralizing for police officers. They've been forced to work a lot of extra overtime, and that's not healthy for them or safe for us. And interestingly, even bizarrely though, they earned a lot of extra comp last year, which is incentivizing them to quickly retire this year, because the pension that they get for the rest of their lives is a function of whatever their salary was the 12 months before they retire. And so that's really crazy. As new police commissioner Jessica Tisch is getting a hold on the excess overtime, it's actually incenting some of our best and experienced police officers to retire suddenly at a time when we're already short. So that we've got to fix that quirk, unintended side effect as well.
Yeah. So here's my one thing I want to say, and I'm curious what your reaction is. And I'm going to start with saying I think
that's not true. There's not just one thing you want to say. Anybody who knows it, if it's like old school, 1 thing in 34 parts. Come on, get out part 1 of the 34 parts of the one question you had.
I do think I'm wrong about. All right, I do think I'm wrong about this. Just like I was wrong that immigration would not be a major factor in the presidential election. So I want to start off by saying that I know I'm in the minority here, without question. Okay. And I also want to say that I agree with you that the stats are clear. Crime has gone up overall, especially amongst the worst crimes. I will say some are trending down over the last 12 months, but since COVID, the New York has done a horrible job relative to other large cities in its recovery of the COVID bump in crime, which seemed to be spread pretty much everywhere in the world. But we have not recovered as fast, and we're heading in the wrong direction in certain areas. And the ones that we are heading in the right direction, it's single-digit decreases. It's not good. Couldn't agree more. I'll also say, Whitney, that it's almost moot, because the perception of safety matters a lot, and people absolutely feel less safe. So all that being said, lifelong New Yorker, I kind of echoed what you said, Whitney, in the beginning, which is compared to when I was going to high school on the Upper East Side in the 1990s, New York City is still a dream. It is, and it's compared to all the other large cities I travel to around the world, and I won't name names. It is still a dream. I still feel extraordinarily safe here. I ride the subways. Maybe back to like mid-90s paranoia, where, all right, it's 1 a.m, maybe I'll take a cab versus riding the subway, which for 20 years, I wouldn't hesitate to take cab. So I guess what I'm saying...
You don't stand near the edge of the platform.
Which, by the way, I've never done. Even when things were safe, why would you give anyone the temptation? Don't blame the victim. But Whitney, I guess what I'm saying is, how do you balance the need to communicate urgency, which I agree is there, with sort of nuance on this issue? Because we're not the safest large city in the world, right? Absolutely, but we're up there. I mean, we're not bad. So how do you balance that?
Yeah. It's important. I don't want to be too negative, because it's not too late. We're starting from a very high base where we have incredible people and assets. And, the fact that, our rents are sky high and vacancies at 1.4%, creating a housing crisis, is in fact due to how many people want to live here. Because we're an incredible city. And tonight I'm at a mayoral forum about the arts, and our museums and arts scene is incredible. You pick a field, tech, finance. This is the place to be. I'm thrilled that my 3 adult daughters in their 20s are all back in New York, building their careers here. That's how it should be. We've just got to stop punching ourselves in the face. That's the thing that just drives me crazy. We have so much money. We're spending so much. We're so rich. And if we would just spend the money more effectively, we could really be living in paradise. And so it's still the greatest city in the world for sure. But there are alarming trends. About 2% of our population has been leaving every year the last 4 years. And it hasn't slowed down after the pandemic. Just last year, we lost another 2%. We're down 8%. Only San Francisco over that time period has done worse than New York. And that's a pretty fundamental metric. Are people of any city, state, country, are people moving in or are they fleeing? And people are leaving this city. Of the 70 largest cities in America, we're the second worst in the last 5 years. Only San Francisco's worse at 10% population loss. And that's an affordability primarily. It's crime secondarily, schools third. And so I'm a business person. I'm talking to a lot of real estate people, and they're dying to invest and build in this city. They look at the richest city in the world, the highest population density, 1.4% vacancy rate, rents sky high. It's a dream market for them to invest in. And the city just makes it impossible with bureaucracy and regs and the zoning rules. And so these are fixable problems. That's the good news. Like, I would not want to be Philadelphia or Baltimore as mayor there trying to figure out cities that are, approaching death spirals, right? We're a long ways from that. That's great, but we're heading in the wrong direction. We better change direction.
Look, we've had the business here for a long period of time. Post-COVID, we haven't discussed it in the last year or two. Post-COVID, there was conversations here about, like I said, unincorporated business tax,
right?
Getting hit with taxes left, right, and center.
Yep.
And a population shift down to Florida.
Yep.
And how affected our business. And not just the cost of rent. I mean, we were told by a big real estate firm that in 2 years, there's not going to be any commercial space left for professional service firms, that space is going to get tight. I don't, obviously that's self-serving of them. I recognize that. The other thing that goes through my head as a consumer in New York is all the shuttered stores or empty space. And it makes me think, how well is the New York economy doing? Is this really a place to work? Or I go past windows of storefronts where they're shattered, and they're shattered for a month or two. So it goes back to crime, economy, return on what New Yorkers get for their taxes, which I know you've covered all this. But I'm just saying, those are some of my biases.
I was in Dallas.
What's that?
But to be fair, John, I was in Dallas. I was in Dallas last week, and their CVS has everything locked up too, and everybody there has a gun. So I don't know how much of that is macroeconomic cycles. I'd love to see the data on, like, are we just moving to online shopping and that's causing these companies to be less profitable? Is it a New York City specific problem? It's horrible. I agree. No, I don't like taking my daughter into CVS and having to ring for a service person because we can't trust people not to steal every deodorant on the. I agree, but I think sometimes it's referred to as a distinctly New York City problem. That is happening everywhere in the country.
Yes and no. There's no shampoo and deodorant behind plexiglass in Dallas. We particularly California and New York basically made crime legal. We decriminalized all but the most serious crimes, and then we were shocked to find out that they went up a lot. And is driving stores out of business, and organized criminal gangs were, raiding retail establishments.
And that's what I'm saying. I feel like there's a domino effect. That's really where I'm getting to. It's creating strict rules, enforcing those strict rules.
Yes.
And why aren't we? What happened there? Why aren't we prosecuting people for theft? I agree. That's a big problem.
There were 8 pieces of legislation that passed, 6 in the state house, state legislature, 2 in the city council, that effectively, collectively went much too far. The idea, I was part of the coalition that fought for some of these, like bail reform and discovery reform, et cetera. But it went, the far left hijacked it in a one-party city and state. And the legislation went much too far. So as a simple example, we passed bail reform 5 years ago that effectively eliminated almost all bail, which was good because bail was a crude and unfair system that allowed dangerous guys who had money to buy their way out. But an indigent person who wasn't dangerous was rotting in Rikers, right? The trade-off, though,
sounds like a good name for a play, but keep going.
Is we needed to fix the fact that New York to this day is the only state in the country that does not allow judges to consider dangerousness. And it was like, well, what else is there to consider? You know, if a guy beats up his girlfriend and is arrested for it and is threatened to kill her, a judge should, of course, be able to decide whether to let him back out or not. You know, whether he's likely to go kill her, right? And so the far left, though, when the legislation passed, didn't fix this. So we got rid of bail, didn't allow judges to consider dangerousness, and it went into effect January 1st of 2000. That year, 100,000 people across New York State were released that wouldn't have been prior to the law. But judges, they weren't released in a smart or selective way. Judges weren't allowed to consider dangerousness. Isn't it any surprise then the murder rate in New York City went up 47% that year? It's that kind of, you know, good intentions run amok in a one-party city and state. And this happens in red states as well, where extremists take over when you have no opposition party effectively. And so I'm going to have to go to Albany and fight to fix some of this legislation and go to the city council as well.
Well, recidivism, I think that was another article in the Times again a few days ago, where somebody repeatedly arrested for stealing out on the streets shortly thereafter, I think eventually punched a police officer.
Yeah.
And spent 3 months in prison for a still shorter period of time than he was sentenced to.
Yeah.
So why would it be a surprise? I'm not saying once a criminal, always a recidivist, but if you've done it more than once and significantly more than once.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
It's much harder to show a tiger change its stripes.
Yeah. Well, look what California was a leader in this area of criminal justice reform. 10 years ago, they passed a Proposition 47, which basically decriminalized all low-level crime. New York followed about 5 years later. So California got hit with the first wave of this craziness. And so on November 5th, there was Prop 36 that passed with 68% of the vote in ultra-liberal California that basically didn't roll back all of Prop 47. But for example, the third time you're arrested for low-level stealing from a store, it's upcharged as a felony. If a gang of 3 or more people goes and knocks off a store, it's immediately charged as a felony. If a drug dealer sells fentanyl that kills somebody, they can be charged with murder now, right? So it restored some common sense, and this is what has to happen in New York as well.
Hey, when did this happen to New York in terms of because I've always New York obviously has a reputation globally of being somewhat left, and then the Republicans will argue it's extremely left, radical left. But again, being a lifelong New Yorker, right, I never thought of us as radical left. I've always thought of us as like so typical, like fiscally conservative, socially slightly to the left. When did this sort of far left take over? Is this just de Blasio, or is it because I don't consider Bloomberg or anyone else, even Adams, for all his problems, right, that left? When did this happen?
Well, the answer is at the state level, there was always, we weren't quite a one-party state until 2018, when Democrats flipped the state Senate. Then we became a one-party state. And in 2019, for example, that bail reform legislation passed without giving judges dangerousness, which was the foolishness that literally dated back to 1971. But there was a crude workaround. You had a bail system that judges could use to keep people behind bars who needed to be generally. But then, bail reform is a classic example. State Senate flipped in 2018. Legislation, misguided, very dangerous legislation passed that didn't give judges dangerousness in 2019, and it went into effect January 1st of 2020, and right then is when crime skyrocketed. So at the city level, Bloomberg left 11 years ago, and you had 8 years of far left de Blasio, and then 3 years now of not far left. He's, policy-wise, he's probably closest to me of the candidates currently in the field, but not so much policy-wise, but corrupt and incompetent Mayor Adams in the 3 years since then.
So I have a question, unfortunately, to which I don't know the answer to, which is not really a great move for a practicing lawyer, but I know who my audience is, meaning you, not so much the listeners. What is the mayor's role within New York City working with the president of the United States? I assume there's some interaction. And if so, how do you see yourself, if elected, interacting with President Trump?
Yeah. I suspect I'm not aware. I mean, right now, of course, Mayor Adams is running around to Mar-a-Lago.
Oh, yeah. It's clear that Mayor Adams is there.
Because I mean, he says, looking out for the interests of New Yorkers. We all know the truth, which is he's trying to avoid prison and, angling for a pardon or to have Trump instruct his AG to drop the charges. Look, federal dollars played a very important role, particularly, for example, MTA, our transportation, quite a bit of housing money, et cetera. So, look, I've been fighting Trump and Trumpism with every fiber of my being it's in the 9.5 years since he came down that damn escalator. And but as mayor, I will do my job and look out for the people of New York and cooperate in some areas. For example, there's another area in which none of the other Democrats in this primary are willing to go, but I think we should reopen the ICE office at Rikers Island. I think anyone who is not a citizen, who's arrested of a crime serious enough to be sent to Rikers, our local authorities should have the authority and the option to say, you know what, this person's a known gang member. They just beat up somebody, some sort of felony. Let's hand them over to ICE, and they're no longer our problem, and we don't have to pay $500,000 a year to keep them at Rikers. This was legislation the city council passed in 2014 to shut down the ICE office in 2015 and basically blocked all cooperation and communication between New York City authorities and federal authorities. And this was, true under Biden as well. And that's crazy. There are people on the terrorist watch list. There are people wanted for murder in other countries. We want our local authorities to be getting notifications from federal authorities and Interpol and ICE about, hey, if you happen to come across this person, arrest them. And same thing, we should if, that Venezuelan migrant gang member who terrorized one of Alvin Bragg's ADAs a couple months ago and was arrested. It was his 7th arrest last year. And I was like, why wasn't he turned over to ICE and put on the next plane back to Venezuela on the first arrest, right? If you're not a citizen, it's a privilege, not a right to be in this space rate. You don't have the same protections as a citizen.
Who's arguing against this?
It's so reachable.
Like, I'm left.
I wouldn't even. I'm the only person in the Democratic Party saying this because I'm going to be accused of being anti-immigrant and, being part of the roundup and deportation of 12 million, almost all hardworking, law-abiding illegal immigrants in this country. I don't favor that. New York City's been a sanctuary city back to 1989. And what that means is if a woman who's here, who's an illegal immigrant and is raped, she doesn't have to fear going to the police to report the rape and who raped her because she might get turned over to ICE and deported, right? A woman with children goes to school to drop her kids off at school, isn't worried about, somebody at the school reporting her. A guy working construction who falls off a ladder and breaks his leg doesn't have to worry about going to the hospital because it's a city hospital, right? Like that's the reason I support us being a sanctuary city. But of course, again, as in every case, good ideas taken to extreme are bad ideas. And when the city council passed the 2014-2018 legislation, closing the ICE office and precluding all communication, that's crazy. And it endangered all of us.
One other question that I have that's important. Look, it's pretty clear to the world that anybody who knows me on LinkedIn, I'm Jewish. And I see what's going on or what was going on in the universities in New York City.
Yeah.
Any thoughts there? And does the mayor have any power or ability to take action? Because, I know, look, like I said, I've known you for a while. And I've known John for a while. The three of us are about tolerance and respecting differences.
Sure.
So I'm not necessarily against certain levels of communication even with ideas that I don't agree with. But when you mix them with racism and violating other people's civil liberties,
Right. And hate speech and calls for genocide.
yeah, I mean, there was a bookstore, I think, on 38th Street that's doing an education on the starting an intifada. It was just in social media last week. And I've actually walked past the bookstore on my way to and from my home where I've seen signs, so it wasn't a surprise when I saw it. But has that come up at all in your platform?
Yeah, very much. Well, I wasn't lucky enough to be born into the tribe, so I married into it. And I told my wife on our first date we could raise our kids Jewish, and I'm a man of my word, so we have 3.
You and John have something in common there.
Yes. And so we've been members of Central Synagogue for more than 20 years. And so, I have a daughter who's a senior in college who is experienced, Students for Justice for Palestine sending out the most anti-Semitic, typical copy and paste screed that they're sending around colleges around the country. And my daughter feeling like she couldn't. I said, well, you have to write a letter to the editor and rebut all this outrageous stuff. And she said, oh no, Daddy, I couldn't do that. I'd lose all my friends. And she wears a Star of David, and the idea that when she's home in the city, and she's graduating, coming back in a few months into the city. So this is very personal to me. I think it is outrageous. It's horrifying to see how much anti-Semitism and just ignorance there is out there. These idiots chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which is, 1, a call for genocide, but 2, these idiots don't even know what river and what sea. Right? The level of, I don't know which is worse, the ignorance or the just casual anti-Israel sentiment that then morphs into, anti-Semitism. So the idea that these universities, my alma mater, Harvard, completely botched this and allowed a very unsafe learning environment. So I respect the right to protest and free speech and First Amendment and all of that. But when people are chanting hate speech, creating an unsafe learning environment, and then when you have sort of mobs, both on college campuses, but out around our city, blockading roads and breaking windows and so forth, I have a very, very low tolerance for that.
So what can the mayor do in that situation? Because I like Ron, like you, I have 2 daughters who are being raised Jewish. My wife is Jewish. I get very emotional about this issue. So this issue, when I see the students being blockaded, being harassed, yes. I want to expel and jail everyone. I also know that college is a time to express controversial opinions. I would tell my daughter that's your safe space, if you will, before the consequences start in the real world. So I struggle with balancing this. What could the mayor do to achieve that balance, but make people feel safe and welcome?
And if so, what do you plan on doing if you have the ability to influence it?
Yeah, I think to some extent it's enforcing. You have to have a permit, and so the police are aware and can have a police presence there to make sure that that free speech doesn't veer into, anarchy and smashed windows and so forth. And having the police quickly arrest people who are engaging in illegal behavior. Not allowing marches. Some of these protesters have tried to do marches into Jewish neighborhoods in a highly provocative way.
No, not have tried. They've done it.
Yeah,
I've actually had people send me videotapes.
Yeah,
videos. There's just that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's not allowed. We will literally block your route, and your right to free speech doesn't involve doing something that provocative. I was once out at JFK, and some of these protesters were trying to block the roads with their cars. I'd impound their cars immediately. Raise the costs for this behavior. And by the way, anyone engaged in this behavior who is not a U.S. citizen, I'd flip them right over to ICE for ones, not for protest, but for actions for violating the law here. And by the way, I would also have the city lawyers be looking into the funding sources. I have very good information. A friend of mine is about to file a lawsuit, in fact, that the Chinese government I was like, wait, isn't it the Qataris? And he's like, no, the Chinese are just trying to foment dissent in the United States.
And and I've heard the same thing, quite frankly, that some of this is back from China.
Yeah.
She's so shocking.
So allocate some of the city's legal resources to cracking down on these so-called nonprofits that are in fact front groups that are designed to undermine our country and create fractions, divide us and Americans. That's really got to be cracked down on.
Hey, Whitney. Sorry, Ron, did you want to say something?
No, just we're coming towards the top of the hour, so I just
Close up. Yeah,
bring that to everybody's attention.
I'm still kind of. My last question is, I'm still kind of fascinated with sort of how the politics shake out and who the different voting groups are, because I think almost everything you mentioned, you've said to me, is so blindingly obvious. I think a few things maybe we can have a debate on. I could see more gray area. I could see reasonable counter arguments. But here's my struggle with this, and this is why I want to understand like who these people are that disagree with you, because I'm left of Ron. I've got some pretty far left friends. I don't know anyone. I don't know a person who would disagree with the statement. A rapist or a murderer who gets arrested and turns out to be not a documented citizen, illegal alien, should be arrested and deported. I don't know anyone.
Arrested and serve their time and then deported. I mean, if it's a serious enough crime, they got to serve their time. Yeah.
Like who is voting against you? Who are these people that we're placating? Are they actual real voters, or am I missing something?
Keep in mind, when you only have 26% turnout in a Democratic primary in a very liberal city, that's a super liberal voting bloc. So, nearly half the people voting are far left, and they would, they want to, you pick it. No rent increases ever for anybody in New York, right? Or something that would further destroy our housing industry. Zoran Mamdani's out there, wants to open up city-run grocery stores in every borough, like to address affordability. I can't think of a worse idea. And when it comes to immigration, I think people are they lump all immigrants together, and they're like, we have to stand up against Trump. And I was like, I have no interest in cooperating on trying to deport 12 million hardworking, law-abiding, albeit illegal, people here illegally. I think it would crash our economy, spike inflation through the roof. And keep in mind, a lot of these families have children who are born in the U.S. who are U.S. citizens, right? I think it'd be a cruel and self-destructive thing to do, but I absolutely want to cooperate with them on deporting people who are up to no good in this country, who are abusing the privilege and as guests in our country. And so the question is, it can sometimes be hard. Like if there's an ICE raid of an apartment with one known bad guy and an otherwise innocent family, so they all get swept up and deported. There are people who will argue with you that we shouldn't do that at all. And I said, well, maybe you should have done, honestly, you shouldn't have let your son become a gang member, but there's nuance to all of this. And, it's very nuanced to say, well, I support the 1989 sanctuary city status that we have, but not the 2014, 2018 enhanced sanctuary city that the city council passed, right? I support getting rid of bail, but not unless you give judges dangerousness. I support the Close Rikers campaign to the extent that we reduce the size of Rikers, but it's actually, I think, a terrible idea to close it completely. We're not building enough beds in the 4 borough-based centers that are under construction. So you better keep Rikers open, but you got to tear down the dilapidated, dangerous facilities that are out there and have a smaller, safer, better run Rikers in addition to the new centers in the 4 boroughs, right? There's nuance to all of this. But
thank you.
That
makes a lot of sense.
When you're dealing with people whose whole lives have been, focused on the Close Rikers campaign, they don't want to hear about, well, why don't we shrink and fix Rikers? Nope. They're like, nope, got to close Rikers.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we obviously wish you the best in the mayoral race. It's a daunting task for whoever becomes mayor.
Yes.
And we really appreciate your time today.
Yeah.
And if there's anything else you want to add, John.
Thank you, Whitney.
Nope.
Good luck.
thank you very much. I'm going to be out there offering New Yorkers, saying I'm the only change candidate in the Democratic primary. I think voters are looking for change, and so hopefully I can get out there and reach enough of them with my message to actually get elected and have to execute on all this.
Well, you've taken on daunting tasks before,
Yep.
so this adds to one of them.
I wish you the best, Whitney. I think it'd be great. I think it'd be a great.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
You as well.
Bye-bye.